Have you ever wanted to create such cool graffiti pieces like... But since graffiti is considered vandalism, I thought of creating my own way of drawing digital graffiti using Adobe Illustrator. So if you're new to my channel, I'm Amira and It's Boston is a place where I share my graffiti speed art videos and art tutorials. In this video, you will learn how to draw graffiti letters on Adobe Illustrator. So without further ado, let's get to it. So first create your artboard, and I'm going for 1500 by 1500 pixels. Then click create and your artboard will appear. So we'll start by sketching out the letter using the paintbrush tool. From the brush tab, I'm going for my Wacom brushes. You can choose whatever brush you want, since either way the outline will be drawn with the pen tool, so that's just for the sketch. Testing out the brush, the size is fine. Now I'll lower the opacity down to 24%, then decrease the brush size a little bit. Need to increase it a bit more. Alright, that's fine. Since I'll work in layers and I don't want them to get messed up, I renamed this layer as sketch, then I created a new layer above it and kept it locked for now. Okay, now that it's all set, using the paintbrush tool, we'll start drawing the basic A shape. I'm not aiming for anything fancy, just the typical A shape without any flares. You can even see how distorted I drew it over here. So it's just hard for me to sketch proper letters anyway. So we're gonna use this as a guide to draw upon it and add extra details on the other layers. Remember that layer we created previously? Unlock it now and keep the first layer locked. In this new layer, we'll go beyond the standard A shape. So I'm increasing the opacity a little bit more here. And I'll start sketching from the top of the letter. So instead of drawing a flat horizontal top, I'm making it a bit slanting over here. Then maybe a smooth corner and then draw an extension. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just basically drawing freestyle letters. Or in other words, I'm trying to divert away from the standard letter shape. So the more you divert or the more you create your own touches to the letter, the better it looks or the more complex it looks. And that's how I personally view graffiti, as a way to break some rules. Okay, so the more you divert, the more complex or the better it looks. Maybe you can squeeze it in the middle, maybe you can just add an arch at the bottom, or make the bottom narrow and then go up way wider. Maybe you can add bulge in the center, make some sides fatter than the other. So whatever way you choose, just be creative and create some art. Okay, so back to the sketch, I drew a slight notch at the upper left corner, then went all the way down. I intended to make the left leg a bit wider than the right one, so you can see how I made the bottom left part more extended, as if the letter is leaning on one side. Then for the right leg, I drew an extension to the bottom right corner, then went a bit curved and narrower all the way up. So you can see the pattern over here. We're trying to make the letters less like the A shape. Like in the corners, I don't make the two sides end at an angle. No, instead, I try to give it a different shape, and the more creative you get, the better. I'm aware that this letter might not seem that intricate, for the sake of making this tutorial as simple as possible. So you can see how I diverted from the standard horizontal bar at the center and drew it as a strike extended to the left at an angle, then goes all the way back to the right leg ending behind it. So after I finished working on the sketch, I selected all the strokes, then lowered the opacity to 24%. Now create a new layer by clicking on that little box we have at the bottom. Make sure the second layer is locked. Then rename this layer as outline. So this time we will use the pen tool to create the outline. I'll increase the stroke a bit more over here. Then left click to create an anchor. Left click again, and as you click, drag your mouse to create a slight curve. Click on that middle anchor. Then left click to create the next anchor point. And as you click, drag the mouse to create a slight curve, and so on. Alright, moment of honesty over here. I still remember how I freaked out about the pen tool when I first started using Adobe Illustrator. So if you're a beginner and the pen tool overwhelms you, hang on there. With practice, you will find yourself mastering this tool, I promise. Okay, here comes the trick. When I'm outlining, I don't go along the leg and draw the inside strokes. No, instead, I continue all the way on the outside, just outlining around the outer strokes, and that's it. So in other words, I'm creating a path for the outer shape of the letter, and once I reach the first anchor we created, I will click on it to join it and create one path only. I'm zooming out here to show you how it goes along the outside shape only. So now let's jump into the inside strokes. I technically divided this shape into 4 spaces in the inside. The middle triangle, the space between the 2 legs, and the 2 spaces at the right. So I'll start outlining each space in separate paths. I first started with the triangle in the middle, creating a path of 3 anchors. Next, I'll draw the bottom space, and so on. Think of it as the empty spaces inside the letters, the ones without any fill. Now I finished outlining those spaces. Oops, I forgot to outline this shape. So I'll do that too. So now let's splash it with some color. Behind the scenes, as you can see here on the left, I created my color palette of blue, pink, and purple shades respectively. To create a nice gradient of those colors, use a gradient tool you will find in your toolbar at the bottom. To add a color, left click on any space on the gradient panel, then double click on that little square you have to unfold the color options and choose your own color. Make sure the angle you have is -90 degrees, and in doing so, we'll place the dark colors at the bottom of the letter, and as we go up, it gets lighter. So feel free to play around with the colors. I created my palette already on the left, so I'll directly use the eyedropper tool to fill in the letter. Okay, this still doesn't look like an A, right? Remember those 4 spaces that shouldn't have any fill? We'll use the Pathfinder tab to cut through those outlines. If you don't have the Pathfinder tab open, click on the Window tab and you will find the Pathfinder right at the bottom. Once you have it open, select the main outline of the letter we drew at first, along with the other outlines we want to have them cut through. Then click on minus front. Ta-da! The shape is starting to form right now. Remember the inner strokes we ignored while outlining first? We'll draw them now. I'll start by drawing the one between the 2 legs. And now this looks awful, so I'll better trace it from my sketch instead. copying and pasting it in the outline layer. And there you go. So we're going to do this for the parts where the outline is incomplete. You can also do this step while creating the outlines right off the sketch when tracing over it instead of doing what I'm doing right now. Now let's create a thicker outline and shadows. Once it's all set, copy the main outline from the Edit tab. Then create a new layer. Notice that I kept this layer below the one I was working on earlier, since we want the outline or shadows to be behind the letter. So right now I'm working on this new outline layer to increase the outline a little bit more. Now that we created a thicker outline, let's add some shadows. I duplicated this layer by left-clicking and dragging it all the way down to the bottom on this Create New Layer icon. Make sure to lock the other layers. Okay, so now drag the shadow down to the bottom. Make sure you have the fill as black and also the stroke color here, I kept it as black. Now I'm working on the layer that has the fill. Here I'm increasing the stroke weight of the inner strokes. See how awkward it is to have the inside ones thinner than the outside, so make sure you have them all at the right thickness. So here I continue drawing more strokes and I'm using the fill only to create those sharp edges. I like to make them pointed and sharp instead of just rounded endpoints. Now I'm going through all the parts where I can add such strokes. Notice that those strokes were originally drawn in the sketch, but I haven't traced over it since I know that I would later on change the outline thickness. So it's easier for me if I start drawing the inner strokes once I settle on the main outline. It saves me some time instead of editing each individual stroke, if you know what I mean. Now let's spice things up and add some highlights. So right here, I'm using the pen tool to draw the highlights on the parts that I want to pop. For the highlights, I'm using the fill as white. So to break this down, it's like drawing some white shapes at the corners and the edges of the letter. You can also get creative and draw your highlights using the stroke tool only, just without the fill. And you can see that I did this to the edge of the left leg. Some people would actually prefer to have the letter solid without much shine to it, or in other words, without adding the highlights. So if you're one of them, you can just skip this step and move on to the next one. And now it's the freestyle time. Now that you learned how to get the basic graffiti shape, get creative and add some extra effects and details. You can see how I went for adding some gradient above the fill, gave it some jagged edges, Then I added some drop shadows in between. Now let's spice things up even more and add some drippings. I drew some smooth drippings from the shadow layer, the black one behind. Then went to make the left leg melting even more, so I added a drip melting from the letter itself. I added some highlights to that dripping just to give it a realistic feeling as if it's emerging from the letter itself. Then I created another little drip to the left and drew some shadows behind it just to exaggerate its effect. And then I added some highlights. And ta-da! Here's the final result. I added more details to it, as you can see. The background yellow outline all around it. Then added background circles behind. Added some glow to it using sparkling stars. I created a tutorial for it, so you can check it out in the ribbon above. This added a lot of shine to it and made it even pop. So if you guys enjoyed watching this video, please hit the like button. This would really encourage me to keep creating this content. I'll also appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel to see more of my videos. Thank you so much for watching.